I want to talk today about feedback, and particularly that feedback that we carry around with us for years and years and years. One of the things I often ask on the programs that I run with women in particular is there a piece of feedback somebody gave you years ago that you are still carrying around with you? And invariably lots of hands go up. And I think part of the reason for that is there's a lot of books and articles and training programs on how to give good quality feedback. And there's quite a lot of information on how to accept feedback graciously. There's not a lot of feedback on how to evaluate feedback. So I want to talk briefly about the reactions we have to feedback, how to evaluate it, and then what you do after that. So generally my observation is that there are three responses to feedback, particularly constructive feedback, you know, that you need to get better at feedback, or you could have handled that better. The first one is to get angry. And when we get angry, we justify what's happened. And then over the longer term, we can explain away what's been said. The second response or reaction is to get defensive. And when we get defensive, we tend to place blame, usually pointing at somebody else other than ourselves. And over time, we can excuse what happened. But the third reaction is the one I think is really insidious, and I think it's what many women get into when we give them feedback, and that is to experience shame or embarrassment. And when we feel shame, we feel the need to apologise. Shame comes from that sense that we haven't lived up to somebody's expectations, or we haven't lived up to our own expectations, and we have something to feel embarrassed about and something to apologise for. And over time, what we do with that reaction is to try and atone. And when we atone, we try to fix or correct so that we don't make the same error again. But the problem with atonement and taking that responsibility from the reaction of shame is that sometimes we focus on trying to improve things that quite frankly are not worth the effort. So what I think we need to do when we receive a piece of feedback, other than initially thanking the person for having the courage to give us the feedback, is to spend some time evaluating it. And when we evaluate, I think there are three things we need to think about. The first thing is, how credible is the person giving us the feedback? And credibility comes down to two things when it comes to feedback. The first thing is, what authority do they have? And by authority, I don't mean what hierarchical position they have, but have they observed us up close, and are they able to give us first-hand information about what they saw and the impact that behaviour had? The second thing I think we need to ask ourselves is, how trustworthy is the source? Do they have positive intent? Are they trying to help us improve? Or do they have some hidden agenda or some axe to grind that actually has very little to do with us? So are they credible? And by that I mean, are they authoritative and are they trustworthy? The second thing I think is worth considering is, how frequently have you heard this feedback? Because if you've only heard this feedback once or from one person, chances are it says more about them than it does about you. If you've heard this feedback multiple times, perhaps in slightly different language from a range of people, then there's a good chance it's worth considering and doing something about. So think about the frequency of the feedback. And the third thing to consider is, how valid is the feedback? What is the validity? And validity's got two aspects to it. Is it legitimate? And if we're honest, most of us know when we get given a piece of constructive feedback, even when we're angry or defensive or feeling shame, whether or not it's accurate and therefore has some legitimacy. We can make that assessment for ourselves. But the other thing to think about in terms of validity is this feedback useful? Because if it's feedback about something that's happened in the past or a situation that's never going to come up again, then trying to work on it or fix it is fairly irrelevant. If it's also something that actually one person's talked about, or you know that it's not something you're ever going to be great at and doesn't actually impact on your work or your ability to lead, then maybe you don't want to put too much effort into it. So three things to consider: the credibility of the person giving you the feedback, the frequency with which you've heard it, and how valid it is. And having looked at those three aspects, you can then make a decision. Is this something you're prepared to take on board? Is it something you want to work on? Do you have energy for working on it? Is there anything to be gained by trying to get better at whatever the thing is, or the behaviour that people have talked about? And if you decide there is, then you need to think about what it is you want to work on. And then I would recommend going back to the person that gave you the feedback and thank them again for giving you the feedback and say you've considered it and this is what you're going to do. And what you'd like them to do is to catch you when you get it right. Because part of the problem with being human is that we don't fundamentally change. So if we ask them to think about what we're doing right, then they'll start paying attention to the changes we're investing time in.